The other liberal Fox News commentator, Marie Harf, filled in for Jessica Tarlov on The Five and pushed back on her four MAGA co-hosts as they suggested stupid things like Donald Trump is being mistreated more than people in Guantanamo Bay, and that Trump's corruption will endear him to independent voters. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bell before you go. I would greatly appreciate it. All right, friends, we have a couple of clips to play in this video. Jessica Tarlov, my favorite Fox News commentator, the person who has the toughest job in mainstream media, is on maternity leave, and her replacements on The Five have been lackluster at best until now. So Marie Harf is somebody that we've talked about in previous videos very rarely. She's an occasional Fox News commentator. She's the blonde sitting to Jesse Waters' right. And she's very good at what she does. She should be around more often. She's filling in for Jessica Tarlov, and unlike other Jessica Tarlov replacements for the past several weeks, she's actually pushing back on the MAGA nonsense, which we love. So we're going to play this clip, and this is actually Jesse Waters spewing that nonsense, in which he suggests that Donald Trump, a multi-billionaire real estate mogul ex-president from New York, is being mistreated more than inmates at Guantanamo Bay because he actually has to go to court and face accountability for his crimes.
I call it pure evil. So they've taken away his freedom of speech, and now they've taken away his freedom of movement. So he has to sit there all week for 6 weeks, and if he says anything, they'll throw him in jail. If he leaves, they throw him in jail. That's crazy. I mean, they had more allowances for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. I think they bought $1 million soccer field for the people in Gitmo. I don't know if Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was able to visit his son for his high school graduation, but it's similar. They're freezing him to death. They're putting him in a meat locker. He says it's like 45 degrees in there. And they're putting his life in danger. And they're telling the entire world, all the wackos, this is where the former president's going to be at this date, at this time, surrounded by high-rise buildings. And then they're seizing his bank accounts with these unconstitutional fines, unreasonable bond asks. It's disgusting.
Wow. That was, so melodramatic. This multi-billionaire ex-real estate mogul, ex-president, surrounded by Secret Service, the commander of the biggest cult in American history, who's protected by NYPD, Corp Police, Secret Service, all the things. Well, he's a little chilly in the courtroom, and he may not be able to go see his son's graduation. That's not been determined yet. Of course, Fox is lying about that. The judge hasn't decided. Not that he's been to any of his children's graduations. I don't know why he would make an exception for Barron, his youngest son, the youngest son on whose mother he cheated with Stormy Daniels, which was a predicate fact for this very prosecution. Then he paid her off and paid off others to try to prevent the scandal from leaking before a presidential election, thus the election interference case. Jesse Waters thinks that this is pure evil. It's pure evil that Donald Trump be held responsible for his potential crimes, for which he has been credibly accused, that he might actually have to face the justice system that others have to face all the time, others less privileged than he. And this is precisely the point that Marie Harf makes here.
He actually is, I mean, Jesse, to your point, he is given special treatment. He is under a gag order that any other defendant, if they violated repeatedly on Twitter, online, would have already been thrown in jail. He is under court orders that any other defendant would have, and he is violating them every single day.
Marie Harf is absolutely correct. Donald Trump is actually, yes, indeed, being treated differently than the vast majority of defendants in the court system. It's true, just not the way that Jesse Waters is lying about. It's actually the opposite. Donald Trump is given latitude and privilege and accommodations and considerations, despite being a belligerently bad faith defendant and actor in these proceedings, such that no other defendant would be given the same privileges. He has been under gag order in numerous trials, in numerous court appearances by numerous judges. And in every single instance, he's defied them. And in many other instances, the vast majority, defendants who violate gag orders would not only face stiff fines, but likely they'd be held in contempt of court and thrown in jail. Donald Trump has not been behind bars. He is being granted considerations that most others would not ever be granted. Legal experts across the spectrum have acknowledged this fact, but this is what Jesse Waters wants. Jesse Waters can't abide the notion that Donald Trump be held not to a lower standard, not to given a higher standard of privilege and accommodation. Jesse Waters can't abide the prospect that Donald Trump be treated no more or less than the average American citizen when you consider the crimes. He wants Donald Trump to be given a blank check. Of course, Jesse Waters also believes that Donald Trump is entitled to absolute legal immunity. Jesse Waters and Jeanine Pirro and Greg Gutfeld, Dana Perino to a lesser extent, these are all people that Donald Trump was referring to when he said he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and not lose a single vote. This is the Fox propaganda network. This is the modern Republican Party. Marie Harf also has this to say as well when they suggest that, this could be seen as this prosecution could be seen as persecution, and this persecution may lend itself to sympathy among independent voters. Marie Harf takes an opposite view.
Kayleigh, I agree with you that he is getting a lot of the press attention. The open question in my mind is whether that will be positive for him. When all of the attention is about paying off a porn star, right? It's about all of the criminal indictments, him lying, him acting chaotic. I don't know at the end of the day if that press attention will help him when we know independent voters particularly don't like that chaos. They don't like the lying. They don't like the moral shortcomings and failures of Donald Trump. I actually think that press attention might hurt him and help Biden in the end. But
I think she's correct. Now, listen, as others have pointed out, this case, I would argue, is the least consequential, right? It concerns an even older election. It is considered, it's less scandalous in terms of, January 6th, that federal case is about an insurrection. Classified documents case, the misnamed classified documents case, has to do with the theft of sensitive national defense information that was being then just strewn about at Mar-a-Lago, and then Donald Trump obstructed justice. Fani Willis as well, that district attorney's case in Fulton County, Georgia. All of that has to do with an attempt to steal an election, right? Not merely to perhaps interfere in one, the way that this election interference case is being prosecuted in Manhattan. I would argue, though, based on my understanding, the facts are still strong here. There's a high likelihood that Donald Trump will be convicted, assuming there's not a hung jury. And it's still a legitimate case, but it is perceived to be the least impactful, the least important. And ironically, of course, it's the only one being litigated, and perhaps will be the only one litigated this year. But poll after poll after poll after poll after poll shows that the American people consider Donald Trump corrupt, and that he lacks the character qualities they'd associate with a good president: temperament, judgment, priorities, right? They do view him as a narcissist. They do view him as somebody who's obsessed with revenge. This is being held up in the polls. People talk about how the polls perceive President Biden to be too old to be president. And that is a polling issue that President Biden has to contend with. It's also a polling issue Donald Trump has to contend with as well, which nobody ever talks about. But then Donald Trump also has other challenges that Joe Biden doesn't. More Americans by far consider Donald Trump to be corrupt, unethical, intemperate, obsessed with revenge, narcissistic, and basically possessing these moral pitfalls, which do matter, certainly to liberals and progressives and Democrats, but also most independents as well. The fact that Donald Trump was emboldened and assisted, arguably, by these indictments in the primary doesn't mean that it's going to help him in the general. We've seen no evidence, none, that these things will help him in the general election, because he can't simply win just by courting the Republican base. The Republican base is not the majority in this country. The Republicans have not won a popular vote for the presidency, except, one time in the past 30 years. They have to appeal to moderates and independents. And the evidence so far indicates that they're not impressed with Donald Trump's lies, with his corruption, with his unethical behavior. And they do recognize all of that is much worse. He's more of a liar than Joe Biden. He's more corrupt than Joe Biden. He's more of all of these terrible moral things than Joe Biden is in the eyes of Americans. So it just sounds like cope to me. Aha, it helped him in the primary, ergo it's going to help him in the general. No, not necessarily. As a matter of fact, we've seen, not just with Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump won the primary in 2016, didn't win a popular vote. Yes, he won the presidency with the Electoral College. He also had the nomination in 2020, had the incumbency advantage, lost both the popular vote and the Electoral College. And Donald Trump has not helped the Republicans overall since he's become their leader. They lost in 2020. They lost the Senate in 2021. They lost the House in 2018 when he was the president. They lost the 2022 midterms. They lost the 2023 off-year elections. So where's this idea that Donald Trump is as an asset to Republicans? He's an asset in the primary. They have to be, to win their primaries against other Republicans, they have to be seen as fanatically Trump supporting as possible. The election denying full tilt MAGA. And then to win a general, at least in a competitive race, then they have to run twice the distance back in the opposite direction to be seen as palatable and sane to most voters. Kari Lake is struggling with this right now. So maybe I'm wrong, but based on the evidence I've seen so far, Donald Trump's legal problems are now electoral problems in a general election. And I think Marie Harf was correct to point that out. So let me know what you think in the comments.